Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm conflicted.
We're talking Aguirre, The Wrath of God.
We certainly are. Do we have to?
I am very excited to talk about this, and you and I don't think could be more polar opposites about this movie.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna have a lot of disagreements on this movie. Look, let it be known, this is gonna be our first bare knuckle cage match.
Only one may stand.
Yeah, one may fall.
Yeah, so we've got Werner Herzog's one of his first films that he ever made, Aguirre, The Wrath of God from 1972.
Yep.
It's a very fascinating movie. I'm really looking forward to talking about it. I mean, you can at least admit that it's a fascinating movie to discuss.
Yeah, I will say, okay, so you texted me, like, the category was foreign film, and you texted me a bunch of options, and I didn't read them. And then you texted me back saying, which one do you want? And I just shrugged and said, you pick. So you said Aguirre, and I said, cool. The only thing I knew about it was that it was a Werner Herzog movie. And like getting into that as well, I've only ever seen one Herzog movie, and that was Grizzly Man.
Yes.
The documentary about Timothy Treadwell.
Yes, the one that probably most of our contemporary audience is going to know.
Yeah, great documentary. He's got that like silky, chocolatey German voice that, you know, he also played Herzog. He also played the client in The Mandalorian season 1. So, like, to me, like, I'm aware that he's a German filmmaker. He's very well respected. I know his iconic voice, but I didn't really know much about the man personally or his directing style.
Right.
And wow, I had no idea what I was getting into. I was less prepared than the Spanish conquistadors in the Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. So where this film takes place is in the Amazon rainforest. It's a period piece. It's kind of a historical epic. Epic's kind of a weird word for this film
Epic
to
in
describe
air quotes. Yeah.
I would call it a dramedy because it's very dramatic, but it's also darkly funny. And the humor is a lot more subtle than you think. And it really becomes more apparent as the film goes on, and the folly of this group of conquistadors in search of El Dorado,
the lost city of gold.
Yes, becomes more apparent. Maybe you want to give us a quick plot summary now?
Okay, so plot summary. So Klaus Kinski stars as Lope de Aguirre. I didn't say that correctly, but he stars as that guy, and he's part of a group of Spanish conquistadors searching for El Dorado, the lost city of gold. And things quickly go off the rails. There's mutiny, there's betrayal, they're being attacked by the indigenous people, and things go from bad to worse pretty quickly. And I will say that that's pretty much the plot summary, because this movie has a very minimalistic approach to plot and character.
Yes, and even dialogue.
Yeah. And what dialogue is there is often quite, at least in the beginning, is quite flat and lifeless. But more on that later. That's one of my...
You're really painting a poor picture than this movie is. I wanna even build on the plot that you've described, because, like you said, this movie isn't necessarily heavily focused on the plot details and the characters.
This movie is more of a vibe.
Yes, that is a great way to put it. And so I want to start up the vibe of this movie a little bit more in this point of our episode.
Go for it.
So when this is taking place, it's 1560. So this is not long into the Spanish Inquisition of South America.
Okay.
So this takes place right after the Incan Empire has been conquered by the Spanish.
Right. So they mention Cortez a couple times.
Right.
So he's clearly already a famous conqueror at this point.
Yes. So the whole basis of this movie is that this large group of people have been sent after the success of the Inquisition, and they've been sent on a journey because there was a rumor of an El Dorado, a lost city of gold.
Right.
And so the opening shot of this movie is absolutely stunning. We get a very cool...
I'll give the movie that.
Yeah, we get a very cool shot of all of these people, and it's beautiful because this is shot on location in the rainforest, and we see everybody of this party, and it's hundreds of people walking down a mountain as this heavenly music plays.
Right.
And so we've got the Spanish military. We've got all of these slaves.
We've got noble women being transported on like litters.
Yeah, it's surreal because they're so out of place in this environment.
Yeah.
And so we've got this like very beautiful, like one of the most beautiful places in the world.
The grandeur of
Yeah,
nature.
and like yeah, and just like nature at its absolute core, like juxtaposed with like this very civilized group of people. Or Western civilized group of people, and like them upholding all of their traditions and everything, and so those two kind of opposite kind of.
I will, as much as conflicted as I am about this movie, the opening shot kind of establishes the conflict right away.
Yes,
this is a movie about man versus nature.
Yes, and that is something that's very apparent in Werner Herzog's filmography. If you've ever seen anything, especially like you brought up the best. Obvious comparison.
Grizzly Man.
Yes, Grizzly Man. And so, like you said, this movie is really all down to the vibe of the movie. Like these two conflicting ideas, the absolute madness that is the main character, Aguirre.
Yeah, more on him later.
Yeah, and all of the characters that are kind of centered around this. So I guess the other point that I should mention as well is that essentially there's this large group of people, and then their mission is already failing as the movie opens.
Right.
And so the commander, Pizarro, essentially sends a smaller group of people with Aguirre as the second in command of this group down the Amazon River to see if they can find El Dorado, if it's close by. If it's within a week's distance, they're supposed to come back and tell them. And if it's not, they're still supposed to return, because at that point they've run out of provisions, essentially.
Right. We're all gonna die.
Yeah.
Also, like, I should have looked this up before we started. El Dorado doesn't actually exist, right?
It is a fable. Nobody's ever actually found it. So what I read on this, because I did do a bit of research on this, is that it almost seems like it was a rumor developed by the Incan and Mayan civilizations to kind of almost mess with the Spaniards almost, and get them to like send them away kind of thing for a time.
And that's a great point of just showing how futile this mission is. They are men somewhere they don't belong, chasing after a city that doesn't exist.
Right. And so yeah, so I think that's a pretty good setup at this point of the film and where we're going with this. So let's talk characters and people you may know. And honestly, this is a movie that came out in 1972, and it's a German film doing a foreign film. I actually watched it in English, however, even though it is a German film. More on that later, too, because I have some thoughts on that. But,
yeah, I have some thoughts as well.
But you're not going to know, what I'm getting to about this is that you're not going to know a lot of these actors unless you've maybe watched other Werner Herzog films. And who I'm talking about specifically is the actor who plays Aguirre, Klaus Kinski. Yes.
Yeah, and wow, what to even say about that guy?
So let's start with the character of Aguirre.
Okay.
He is one of the most dark and brooding, insane human beings that I've ever seen portrayed on film.
He's the OG mad lad.
Yeah. There's a lot of shots throughout the film of just him close-up visual of his face, and like it is a look of pure insanity.
In what a face. Like
Yeah.
What a cinematic face. Like he's got these like this like long blonde hair, he's got these big blue eyes, and he's got these like enormous Nick Kroll lips.
Yeah.
And he's very strange looking man.
Yeah, and it just looks like there's a lot bubbling under the surface of him at all times, at any given point in time in this film. There's a lot of anger.
He's often just kind of stalking around scenes, and he's got like a very peculiar way of moving where like it's almost like his shoulders are moving independently of one another. It's very weird.
It actually is supposed to kind of portray that he's injured in some way.
Okay, well that worked.
He's played by Klaus Kinski, who actually worked a number of times with Werner Herzog, most notably, in addition to this, in his film Nosferatu the Vampire and Fitzcarraldo.
And it's a good thing that they got along swimmingly, right?
More on that later.
Yeah.
What I will say about Klaus Kinski in this point in time is that in real life, he was also, and I think the term is crazier than a shithouse rat.
Deranged?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Just in preparation for this, I found a quote from his autobiography that I'm going to read right now.
Okay.
So he had a autobiography that was republished in the 90s after his death, and here's a direct quote. "One should judge a man mainly from his depravities. Virtues can be faked, depravities are real.
Wow. Yeah, he was one of the craziest people ever to grace the silver screen. Maybe, and he's not a good person either. I will say that.
No.
Like, there's some pretty horrible, depraved things he did to his children, to other actors. We'll get into like the specifics and effects and filming in our deep dive of this episode, and kind of the just absolute lunacy.
Let's just say, for the sake of putting a pin in it, I don't think he was acting in this movie.
No.
Yeah. He was a legitimate crazy person antagonizing everyone and trying to stage mutinies this whole time.
Yeah. And just pure insanity. And just dark, evil insanity inside of those crazy blue eyes.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a lot of other actors that I want to talk about, but I will go through kind of the main cast of the group of people who are sent off on the expedition for 1 week.
The characters such that they are.
Yeah. So the leader of this ragtag group of people is Don Pedro de Ursua. He's the chosen commander of the expedition and he's Aguirre's first in command to his second in command.
He's got his wife with him, right?
Yes.
He's that guy?
Yes. He's brought his wife, Inez de Atencia, along with him, and that's where kind of they're holding them in the completely outlandish, like, what did you call those?
Litter.
Yeah, the litters.
Yeah.
And as well, like, the only other kind of woman on this exposition is Flores de Aguirre, Aguirre's daughter.
Yep.
What's really funny about this is Perazzo, the guy who sends them on this adventure, who we only see in the opening scenes of this film, he says, like, against my better judgment, I'm sending these women along with you.
Okay, like, none of these people should be here, but these women and these noble women and their elaborate litters should definitely not be here.
No, like, if they were adventure women, like, if that was kind of the society that they were in at this point in time, maybe, but, like, they're literally being carried at all times by slaves and other conquistadors. It really portrays the silliness of all of these, like,
just the abject silliness of this expedition.
Yeah.
And we're all going to die for your silliness.
Yeah, exactly. The other kind of higher up in the chain of this group is Don Fernando de Guzman. He's the fat nobleman is what he's called.
Yep.
And he's representing the House of Spain along on this adventure.
Cool.
As well, we have Brother Gaspar de Carvajal. He's the monk, the Christian monk who is sent along to basically bring Christianity to what they call the savages.
And he tries.
Yeah, the poor indigenous population along the rainforest. And there's one other character that kind of pops as the movie moves on, and that's the black slave Dokello. I think his character is also very interesting, and it's a very entertaining presence in the latter part of the film, especially.
Right.
So I did want to bring him up as well. And along with these group, like I said, there's the different levels of the Spanish conquistador society, as well as a number of Incan slaves.
Right.
Brought along with them. We've already talked a little bit about Werner Herzog and that this was written, directed by him. I do want to talk a little bit more about his filmography. So I did mention that Fitzcarraldo and Nosferatu the Vampire are the other fiction films that he made, but he's really most known for doing documentaries, right? And you brought up Grizzly Man, which is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other documentaries that he's known for are Into the Inferno, which is about volcanoes, which sounded really cool. I think that one's on Netflix as well. He's done Lo and Behold, Reveries of the Connected World, Into the Abyss, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, and Encounters at the End of the World. They all sounded really cool in their premise, and they all have like 95 to 98% ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, they're all very well received.
Yeah.
And what I'll say about that in regards to, like, you know, Werner Herzog, a man known for documentaries, making fiction films. What I'll say about that is that this film is shot like a documentary.
Yeah, and you know what? Okay, spoiler alert. I really did not have a good time with this movie. I bounced off it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I think part of it was I was so jarred by the filming style.
And for me, I thought it was absolutely ingenious. Throughout the film, it legitimately, the way he's captured it is, like I said, it's filmed documentary style. It's like almost like time travelers were sent back in time to 1560 to film this adventure, essentially.
Yeah, and like there's like moments where like water gets on the lens. Like
Yeah.
it's very kind of it really draws you in.
Yes.
And it didn't work for me personally, but I can certainly admire the Werner Herzogian ingenuity of it all.
Yeah, and so like at its core, this is kind of an art house movie. Like Werner Herzog himself is what I would call an auteur, I think, or an auteur. And you can see in this film what a great documentarian he's going to be later on, because this film is just shot so incredibly well, and that was like one of the most compelling things to me. Is like I said to Jess as we were watching this, like there was multiple times where I was like, I feel like I'm there. I like legitimately feel like I am just have been transported to this time and place, that this isn't like us kind of, watching. Like I feel like I'm actively here and present in this moment in time.
You feel like you're on this expedition.
Yes.
Which, and I guess that also goes back to the filming style, is Herzog, the crazy son of a bitch that he was, he essentially like, him and his crew were basically on this expedition this whole time.
Yes.
Like the movie was shot for like no money. The actors and crew were literally living on these rafts filming this movie. I guess, I don't know.
And that's what the other thing that I kept saying to Jess, like there kept being moments, and we'll talk about them when we get into the deep dive in the spoiler section of our next episode. I kept saying to Jess, like, this is actually happening. Like these people are doing what we're seeing right now. Like this is real. And that's something that just like blew my mind. And so who is this movie for? Well, like you said, it's a low budget film. It's kind of an art house film, but it's filmed like a docudrama, like almost found footage. So here's the thing. Was there any movies that you thought of while you were watching this? Was there anything that came to mind? Because there was one that jumped to my mind immediately. I wrote it down on here and I was shocked when I read about it later. But was there anything that popped to you?
I guess maybe Apocalypse Now.
Yes.
Is that what you're going to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I had written down on my notes here, like, is Apocalypse Now inspired by this? And 100%, like Francis Ford Coppola has said that this is one of his biggest inspirations for making Apocalypse Now. Like, especially the latter half of Apocalypse Now. I was like, this is like us getting the view of Colonel Kurtz for the entire movie, basically.
Well, what's funny is like Apocalypse Now was based on Heart of Darkness, the novella from the 1890s. And I think the tagline for this movie is literally like a journey into the heart of darkness. It's like, there it is.
Yeah.
So
it's really cool because at its core, like this film is about, Western civilization just being stripped down to like its ugly ambitions, right? And the corruption of man, and like men who want to play God. Like Aguirre literally calls himself God at points into the time in this film.
This movie is all about poking fun at the self-aggrandizement of civilization, right? And how futile and pointless and small it all is before nature.
Right. The other like things that I compared it to, like the other direct inspiration. So I did think about this. I was like, this is almost like a found footage film, right?
Are you gonna say the Blair Witch Project?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that was the other one that popped in my head while I was watching this. I was like, I wonder if Blair Witch was also somehow inspired by this. The less obvious inspiration that I was also, or influenced, sorry, the less obvious thing that was influenced by this was the film Predator was also heavily film or
Oh, really? Yeah, kind of. I can see it.
But so what I'll say, like modern day stuff, like The Terror is like one of my favorite series of the last 5 years, season 1.
Yeah, you mentioned it.
Like that's very similar, where it's man versus nature, or man versus the unnatural nature and stuff like that, like supernatural nature. It's about these people on a quest, exploring uncharted territory for fame and fortune, essentially.
Right, and being instantly humbled.
Yes. But maybe not instantly humbled, like,
right.
or their greed and ambition supersedes that humbling, and they're not humbled until it's too late.
This is almost kind of like a Greek myth or like a biblical story,
Yes.
in the sense that it's all about pride and arrogance, and like a very classic story of a man being punished for reaching beyond his limits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how
flying too close to the sun, as they say.
Yeah, and like his unchecked lunacy of this, like it just spirals out of control. Like at no point does anybody really say no, Aguirre.
No. No. Back on the raft. There is a great scene where the fat guy who's declared
Guzman,
who's been declared emperor, he's just scribbling on like a scroll, and he's just claiming all this land is his. He's just declaring himself the emperor of all these lands, and he says something like, "Oh, the farther down river we travel, the more lands we get."
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I'm like, what if I just walked into a Tim Hortons and said, "This is mine"?
Yeah, it's like, and again, that's a good representation of just the follies of man throughout this film, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you're interested in all of those, like the other obvious comparison that came to mind for me as well was Lord of the Flies.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
People being stuck in this natural environment and trying to somehow build a civilization around it. Where
It's like man's inability to come together in a crisis.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another great point as well. That's kind of my thought process of all that. Like, if any of that sounds interesting to you, like, I would recommend this film. Like, especially if you're a big fan of Apocalypse Now, I think you're going to really enjoy aspects of this film because, like I said, it was like instant for me. I was like, this feels like Apocalypse Now.
Right.
It was just all the elements of it coming together. I was like, the other thing that I'll say about this is, if you were going to pair this with a modern day film, I think what would be really interesting would be to watch Mel Gibson's Apocalypto first.
Oh, yeah.
As a first watch, because Apocalypto kind of leads into this situation.
There's probably like a fan theory that like maybe who's the main character in Apocalypto? Maybe he's shooting arrows at these characters like at some point.
So, yeah. So like, but what I mean is like Apocalypto is a very epic, serious movie. Like it's such a good thriller, and I think because of, like I said, how that movie kind of ties into this.
Let me cut you off for a second. Apocalypto is the Hollywood version of this story.
Yes.
And this is the art house version of that
exactly
story.
And so where I think this pairs well as well is not only chronologically do they make sense to go Apocalypto into Aguirre, but I think that Aguirre is so quirky and insanely fun that it's a fun kind of late night movie to follow up something so serious and tense.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. So, like I said, again, this is jumping ahead to my personal review.
Yep.
I really bounced pretty hard off this movie. And I think part of it is it wasn't until over the halfway mark that I finally kind of clicked into my head. I'm like, oh, this is a comedy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to be laughing at these people. And I feel like you and I were having technical difficulties earlier today.
Yep.
And we talked about maybe pushing the recording back a couple of days.
Yep.
Part of me kind of hoped we would, because I thought maybe I should go back and watch it again with that in mind.
Yeah, and what I'll say as well is that for me, like, spoilers a little bit to my review, I really, really like this movie. And I think for me, what I said to Jess in the first 20 or 30 minutes was, I wish I had watched this movie in German with English subtitles instead of watching this in English, because some of the dialogue for me felt a little stiff.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is I know you watched this over a couple of nights, and I think you did a disservice to yourself, because for me, the first 20 minutes, like, my brain was struggling, and then the dialogue just kind of clicked, and everything else was just kind of visually and like audibly, like, you know, connecting with me. That this is going to be a crazy comparison. Let me finish.
Okay.
This is going to be a crazy comparison, but for me, this almost feels like the same trajectory as the movie The Room, in that the first, like, half of that movie, I'm like, what the hell am I watching? This is absolutely insane.
Right.
And then somehow your brain scrambles your
It adapts.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your brain just, like, it snaps, and then once it snaps, it's just like, this is incredible. This movie is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
And everything that they're doing and saying is absolutely wild.
Yeah. Yeah. No, okay, you know what, Blake? I can't say that driving over here today, I was like, Blake's going to bring up The Room, right? But I will say, I almost kind of feel like I need to watch this movie again with the knowledge that it's a comedy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But I don't know that it's necessarily a comedy when they started. But I think as the film goes on and the absolute insanity of this mission becomes apparent, it just spirals out of control and it becomes hilarious.
I will say, like, once once Aguirre stages his mutiny and he crowns Guzman the emperor, and then they start holding like mock trials in the middle of the jungle.
Right.
That's when I was like, okay, this is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like that's like just the shameless futility of it all.
Yeah.
Like that was pretty funny to me.
So I think that people in a modern watch are maybe not going to quite click in the first 20 minutes. Like I said, the opening shot is absolutely stunning.
Yes,
and
I will
and
give
so
this movie that.
let the vibes of the movie just carry you through like the first 20 minutes, and then you're in for an absolute treat.
Look. You need to show up to this movie willing to pass the vibe check.
Yeah.
I think my fatal mistake that caused my expedition to devolve was that I wasn't willing to pass the vibe check that first night.
Yeah, you gotta pass the vibe check. You gotta be willing not to nitpick, because this film is the sum of its parts, and there's a lot of cool parts going on with this. And like I said, I really, really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to talk about how it fits into my filmography and what I like in movies.
Okay, I am, as I said earlier, I am not nearly as excited to talk about it, but I'm here for it.
Cool. So when to watch? I want to hear, like, what are your thoughts objectively? When is the best time to watch a movie like this?
Never.
Screw you.
Probably at night.
Yeah.
This is the kind of movie you need to be really engrossed in.
Yep.
Don't check your phone. Like, just really get into it.
Yeah. Let it wash over you.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah.
Like, let it wash over you. I kicked and screamed against the current. I was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? So I didn't have as good a time.
Yeah. Whereas I let a movie, like I said, I let the movie sometimes wash over me, and if it doesn't work, like, it doesn't work. But in this case, it really did. I think that it's a good late night watch after, like, maybe a slightly more serious movie. I think I didn't mind watching it during the week. Like, I usually say don't watch this movie during the week, but honestly, like, watch it when you want to watch a documentary is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Because it feels so much in the style and traditions of a documentary that's when you're going to enjoy it most.
Pretty much, yeah.
In terms of where to watch, it's actually streaming free on Tubi right now, which is a free platform. It does have ads, so you do have to put up with the ads partway through. Is that where you watched it through?
As soon as you said ads, I was like, fuck that. And it's actually only like $2.99 on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool.
Cool.
So I just rented it there.
Yeah, it's also available on Plex right now as well.
What the hell is that?
It's a streaming software. I don't fully understand it, to be completely honest, but cool. I know that Jason uses it, so.
I don't fully understand you, and we're friends, so that's okay.
Yeah, I think that is the end of our spoiler-free discussion. Yeah, I guess we'll get into the spoiler-full discussion. What I'll say before we wrap up is that, like, I think if any piece of this film, if any little detail of this at all interested you, please go check this out, because this movie deserves your attention.
Sure.
Oh, God.
I feel like a lot of, like, film school purists are about to be gunning for me.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay. I think that... I don't know. I think that people might get in their own heads about a movie like this.
See, okay, let me just put a disclaimer up. I didn't like this movie. That doesn't mean I think it's a bad movie. I'm just saying I personally had a rough go of it.
Yeah.
So
I know I actually texted you after I watched this, and I was like, I don't think this is going to be a movie for you.
Actually, can I read
honest.
Before we break for the deep dive? I don't normally text you my opinions before we record.
Yeah.
But I'm going to read you some of the texts I sent you. So on Wednesday at 6:42, I screenshotted the poster and I said, "Is this what we're watching?" And then at 6:45, you said, "Yep, it's free on Tubi, just with ads." And then at 8:44 p.m. that same day, I texted you, "What the fuck am I watching?"
Yeah. And you know what? I'll say is, again, like, you don't have to take my, like, recommendation that this is the greatest movie ever. I don't think it's the greatest movie ever, but I think it's pretty great. But also, take Michael's point of view with a grain of salt as well, because
yeah, and I've done a good job, like, kind of like couching my opinion in the grander Michaelness of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I may I may not have given this movie a fair shot. Although I will say, like, I don't. Most modern movies kind of try to like gently guide you in.
Mhm.
Well, no, most modern movies try to get your attention right away. They try to guide you in. They try to make sure you're not confused. This movie like spits in your eye from the word go. It's like, come along, fuckhead.
Yeah.
If you think you can roll with us, like, so
It's
you
like-
just be prepared for that.
It's like Eyes Wide Shut. It's like tempting you to turn the movie off in the first
Kinda,
like 20
yeah.
minutes. It's like, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it? No. All right, we got
This
something
is the
special for you.
cringiest, most weak sauce comparison I've ever made. But this is almost like a Dark Souls of a movie, where it's like, all right, like you got to put in some legwork, buddy.
But if you do, you're gonna absolutely fall in love.
Sure.
Okay, on that note, we'll see you next week for the deep dive spoiler discussion.
Bye bye.
Aguirre.
Join us next week where Blake and I throw hands.
The wrath of God. I'm about to throw down the wrath of God
Okay.
on you. We both got our hands up right now.